Good morning, everyone. And let me welcome you to the Orange County Tourist Development Council meeting. This is a special call meeting of July the 18th, 2023. I want to just remind the council members and the audience to please silence your cell phones and similar devices at this time. Also, to the council members, remember, in order to speak so that I know the order, there's a button there just in front of you. Please press the button to ensure that we call you in the order in which you wish to speak. We do have a quorum that is present this morning at this time, and as a result, I'm going to call on Ms. Jody Bainter. Would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, as we begin this morning, we want to open it up for any public comment at this time. Of course, yesterday we had probably a three and a half hour meeting of the Special Tourist Development Task Force that we impaneled to give us some recommendations, both to the Tourist Development Council and to the Orange County Board of County Commissioners. And we're going to hear a presentation later this morning from the co-chairs of the committee, Mr. Tony Jenkins and Ms. Jane Healy will be making that presentation. But we do want to hear from the public if there are any members of the public present. Ms. Garcia, do we have anyone at this time that wishes to speak?
Two public comments for today. First, we'll start with Terry Pratcher and Ms. N.Y. Natheri, please.
All right.
Please state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes. And we have one more, Maria Chiscari. Thank you.
Good morning. Terry Prather, 1610 Rock Lake Drive, Orlando, Florida, 32805. Good morning, Mayor Demings, Mayor Dyer, Mayor Gardner, and members of the TDC. I'm here today as board chair for Visit Orlando. On behalf of our entire board of directors, our CEO, Cassandra Mate, and the nearly 400,000 people that work in the tourism industry, I want to thank each of you for serving on this commission. I come before you with nearly 4 decades in the tourism industry. I've had a unique view of the challenges and opportunities the industry has. In 1986, I was on the construction team that built SeaWorld San Antonio, and that led to me working for SeaWorld in the maintenance department back in 1988. Fast forward, I retired in 2015 from SeaWorld Orlando after being president of the largest marine life theme park in the world. So when I say tourism is an industry of opportunity, I live it every day. I'm a true witness. Visit Orlando plays a crucial role in the tourism ecosystem of Central Florida. By marketing our community worldwide, our mission is simple: to inspire, promote, and grow global travel to Orlando for economic and community benefit. Yes, community benefit. We focus on promoting the entire region, large and small businesses. While our priority lies in investments that generate overnight visitation, let me assure you that we tirelessly promote all projects to ensure Orange County sees a strong return on the TDT investments. As our comptroller mentioned in one of the task force meetings, tourism tax dollars should not be taken for granted. They can be like a roller coaster, and I've ridden a few. Some can be a thrill, some can be fun. They're going up and down. But as you make recommendations on how to divide the TDT pie, I promise Visit Orlando will be working to grow the pie. Because the one thing that we know we have in Orlando, the things that we have in Orlando are unbelievably real. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Prather, for your comments. We'll move to the next speaker, please. Ms. Natheri, welcome.
N.Y. Natheri, Association to Preserve the Indo community, 344 East Kennedy Boulevard, Eatonville, Florida, 32751. Like Mr. Prather, I have been attached to the tourism industry for almost 4 decades. Mayor Dimmings, fellow mayors, and members of the commission, I come here really to thank Mayor Dimmings for his leadership in looking at the process. There have been people who have died over the last 3 decades trying to bring cultural heritage tourism to the fore in this region. I have worked with Bill Pieper. Frankly, I was taught so much about the hospitality industry by people then known as the Orlando Convention and Visitors Bureau. I've worked with Gary Sane, worked a bit with Georgia Gell. And so Visit Orlando has really been a part of who we have been as an effective person within the cultural heritage tourism realm. But not to embarrass you, Mayor Dimmings, it really is your leadership that has allowed this process to open a bit. And so for the public record, I've come to thank you on behalf of the arts and cultural community, of which Preserve Eatonville community has been a member. It is so important that at the Orange County level, because we know that local government is the government that has the most influence on us as individuals and organizations, and for you to allow for a process that really accounts for more than the usual suspects to be a part of the process. I felt it important as a person who has worked under the administrations of President Clinton, under George W. Bush, under President Obama, and I say that because the Preserve Eatonville community actually has that kind of national presence and increasingly international presence. So for the record, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Theory, for your comments and for the great work that you have been doing for decades now to preserve Eatonville and working with the Azora Festival. I know that our Board of County Commissioners is very, very committed to increasing our funding for the cultural tourism various venues that we have within our county. So we needed to have this type of input from our residents in order to help move the needle forward in that regard. So thank you. With that, we have our next speaker, Mr. Scary.
Thank you, Mayor Dimmings. Mayor Dyer, Mayor Gardner, and committee members, I'm Maria Triscari. I'm President and CEO of the International Drive Resort Area Chamber of Commerce. And I have, too, been in this industry for quite a while, over 30 years. Not quite as long as Terry, but I'm getting there. The iDrive corridor is home to over 135 lodging facilities, encompassing 54,000 rooms, which is over 40% of all the hotel rooms in Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County. Hundreds of restaurants, attractions, 6 major theme parks, 90,000 employees, and the world-renowned Orange County Convention Center. The iDrive corridor serves as the economic hub for the Southwest region, providing jobs in over 10% of Orange County's tax base, which pays for schools, roads, and other infrastructure needs. We are the lifeblood of the community, and the Orange County Convention Center is the fuel for this economic engine. The iDrive Chamber of Commerce strongly supports the committee's findings of the Orange County Convention Center as a top priority project to move forward using TDT funds. As we all know, the Orange County Convention Center Master Plan was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners and our community and was put on hold due to the pandemic. This project is shovel-ready and is imperative for economic growth, allowing the Convention Center to stay competitive in a very competitive market. And the return on investment at the Convention Center is well beyond the impressive numbers of businesses, employees, and $3 billion economic impact. That ROI does not take into account the very strong economic region that centers around it, the 90,000 employees, the hundreds of hotels, restaurants, retail outlets, and theme parks that have built around the nucleus of the Convention Center, and the $4 billion of new development that is planned for the future, much of which is predicated on the completion of the Convention Center. Now that we have moved beyond COVID-19, we're ready to move forward. The reason why the responsible leaders who adopted this plan saw and understood the need for those enhancements remain the same today. Today, while other cities have moved forward with their plans, the Orange County Convention Center is sitting idle, and 14 other cities are making moves to capture our market share, spending billions of dollars on new convention centers and enhancing existing facilities. Your support and leadership will bring Orange County to the next level, and our entire Central Florida community will benefit from that. The time is now. Our future is at stake. Thank you for your support in moving our community forward and supporting the completion of the Orange County Convention Center.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scary, for your comments this morning. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to be heard at this time?
We do, Mayor. We have two more, Heidi Evans and Allison Gutierrez. If you please come up. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, you said to state my name and my address?
Yes, please.
Okay, my name is Allison Gutierrez. My address is 263 Creekside Way, Orlando, Florida, 32824. So I live in Orange County, and I'm going into my senior year of high school, and I'm also the president of the Poetry Club as well, and I've been doing poetry for about 2 years. So I'm a spoken word artist. I don't do the poetry that's like Shakespeare or any of that type of stuff. I'm also interested in the digital audio side of music, and I also want to become a public speaker to help my generation and use my voice to help people and also to inspire those that never thought that they could do something like I do at such a young age. I've been working with Exodus United INC, a nonprofit 501c3 organization that's dedicated to serving at-risk youth in Central Florida through arts and education programs for these 2 years. As a young member of my community, I want to use my voice for good. I want to know that I matter. I want to know that I'll be able to find friends and family to learn from and to have a voice and to have a safe space to express these ideas that I have and also to help those that don't feel that they can be able to express those things. But it hasn't been easy, and I found that comfort in arts and culture. I've had the chance now to work with my mentors, Sean Welcome and Shayna Castano at Exodus United. We are working so hard together to raise money to travel to the world's largest youth poetry event in San Francisco called Brave New Voices this week. It's a 4-day celebration of arts, education, performance, and civic engagement. It's a chance for over 500 youth poets like me and the nation's leading artists like Shayna to convene, learn, and thrive. But I didn't always feel this way because I grew up in a rough home and I've been through a lot. I've been evicted more times than I can even remember and seeing kids go through things that not many adults I know have even seen or gone through. But I know now that my voice matters and that my generation is the upcoming future. Words and music gave me the voice to seek out my dreams, and now I feel empowered to use these gifts to learn, write, share, converse, ease and entertain, and pay attention to what's going on in the world around me, because before I didn't. Art and culture made me care again, and it made me care about the people that are around me and what happens to not only my life, but to their life. And as a young kid, I just want to say that not only does what you guys do matter, but what we do matters, and everything that you guys do to help us really does make an impact, and the kids are listening. And we do care a lot about the political system and about what's going on, but we don't have enough resources from our parents or people that don't care to understand. So we really are seeking the guidance that we need. So that's all. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Allison, before you leave the mic, you mentioned that you were a senior in high school, but I don't believe you mentioned the name of the school that you attend.
Cypress Creek High School.
Okay, there we go. All
Yeah,
right.
Cypress Creek High School.
I don't often do this, but whenever we have young people who come and become part of the process, I do think we should encourage them. So let's give Allison a round of applause. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presence this morning.
Thank you, Sue.
All right. All
Thank
right.
you.
We'll move to the next speaker, please.
They're not here.
Okay.
That concludes all public comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for all those who did speak this morning. We're going to move forward on our agenda. And at this time, as we prepare to hear from the co-chairs of the Tourist Development Tax Task Force, I want to kind of share with you kind of the reason why this task force was put together. And essentially, we have the blessing of having strong tourism numbers here within our community that translates into a $75 billion industry. And because of the collections over the last year or better, we are in a very good position. We've been able to, as a county, realize approximately $300 million each year in revenue, and we've been able to increase our contribution to our reserves, and that puts us in a strong position. Many people in our community are very, very aware of that, and consequently, there have been numerous conversations in the community about how we as a county will spend the taxpayer dollars. And as such, essentially everywhere that I would go, someone would ask for a portion of those proceeds. And I know the mayors who serve on this council probably have heard similar requests from various people as well as the remainder of the council. And so in order to have a transparent conversation with our community, I thought that it would be important to first arm the community with the facts about what the law allows, with the challenges and the opportunities that we have as a community to make an investment with those tax receipts that would benefit the majority of people within our community. We may not all agree about which of those potential expenditures is the priority, but I think that we all agree that we want to make certain that the expenditures benefit as many people within our community as possible, including those who may be represented from underserved or unserved communities, those who may be low-wage earners within this community. And so we've had now for the last 4 months or so a very diverse group of people who have volunteered their time, approximately 32 people made up this body of volunteers. They were not elected officials. They were individuals who were chosen by various means. As we established this body, I thought that it would be important to me to get two people who had demonstrated a commitment to this community from business and even journalism. And so we reached out to Ms. Jane Healy, retired editor from the Orlando Sentinel, who's been very, very active for many years in giving feedback and through her journalism, reporting on the tourist development tax and tourism and a number of other things within our community. She is unbiased and I would say unbought. She has a free way of thinking, and we asked her to help co-chair. The second person is Mr. Tony Jenkins, someone who has lived in this community, worked in this community, who has excelled in this community from working as a young adult, a youth at Disney to rising to be the market president of one of the largest healthcare organizations here within the state of Florida, within the nation. And so we have these two individuals who have been leading the discussion. Yesterday, I asked the members of the Tourist Development Task Force if they thought that through the process that was put in place, if they had been given the opportunity to freely voice their opinions, and if they thought that they had been heard based upon the input that they had given. And they all said yes. So that affirmed to me that the process had worked. And they knew as they started that the charge that I gave them was to look at the potential to expand the eligible expenditures of funds based upon the current law. As a subdivision of the state of Florida, as a county, we cannot engage in activities that we knowingly participate in that's contrary to law. So that was why we stressed that it had to comport to the existing laws, because that's the framework by which we collected the money. That is the framework by which we have used to expend the dollars over the years. And I think everyone understood the rules of the game that by which this community played. But there was also an opportunity to, within the confines of the law, to look at how we play the game differently. And so this task force did that. Now, at some point, they decided to go beyond what was initially the charge, because I don't have a crystal ball. I can't foresee the full dialogue that would occur. But through a process, the task force decided that they would expand a bit and give some recommendations to the Board of County Commission and the Tourist Development Council going forward that was slightly outside of the initial charge, and that's okay. You know, this is the process. I believe that in order to get the best governance by your local government, state or federal government, the best way to do that is to involve the people in the process to help make decisions for themselves. And so that has been my style of leadership in my public leadership roles, to use volunteer task forces. We said that with this particular task force, the only guidance that I gave beyond was that we wanted to have representation by labor. We said that they would have a seat at the table. We said that our municipalities within the county would have the opportunity to select a representative. We also said that our veterans, I honor the men and women who have served our nation, and I will always give them a seat at the table. And we said our veterans will have a seat at the table. And then I said that in order to make certain that there was a youthful person that was a part of it, we said that we would select a student from the university. And beyond that, the chambers and various other business entities selected representatives to represent them on this 32-member panel. And they were diverse ethnically, by gender, sexual orientation, and we only know that because of some of what they said themselves about the different constituency groups that they come from. And so we had this think tank of individuals who met, and today we come to the crossroads where the task force leadership will now present the recommendations that they want to see submitted to the Board of County Commission, and ultimately it is the Board of County Commission that has the final authority to make the decisions about how the funds will be expended to the benefit of our community. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the co-chairs at this time. It appears that Ms. Healy is going to speak first, and then Mr. Jenkins.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to again thank Mayor Demings for doing the task force. This is the first time since the tax was passed in 1978 that the citizens have been given any official capacity to comment on the tax. In fact, in 1978, when it was approved by the legislature, there wasn't even public discussion here about it when it was passed. It was all in the legislature, and the input was all there. And if it had not been for George Stewart, our state senator then, the stadium, the arena and stuff would have been low down on the priority list. He got it moved up, and so that it would be built in a timely manner. But I really want to thank the task force. I mean, this was a lot of work for them. This just started in March. There was no precedent for it, so nobody knew, what the work involved. But all of a sudden, they're getting 60 proposals to go over. And this was like during Easter week. We had to go through all those. And I give credit to the people putting the proposals together. They only had a couple weeks to do this, so they really had to get together and do it. And then the task force we listened to that got boiled down to 16 major presentations and then 3 for the granting group. So we heard all those presentations, and that was a lot. And so I really appreciate them doing this. And it was a robust task force. Attendance was very good at all of them. And again, this was in a short period of time they had to do it to come up with this proposal. I also really appreciate the input of the staff. They did all the heavy lifting here, Roseanne, Natalia, and JB, our facilitator. As you'll see, he did a really good job in terms of putting this proposal together. So thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate you doing this. And now I'll turn it over to Tony.
Thanks, Jane. And just want to say that this process, I'll never forget when the mayor called me and asked me to be a part of this. Going into something like this, you really don't know what to expect. But I'll tell you that the decorum that this task force operated under was respectful. They listened. They were independent thinkers, just like the mayor said. And I was so impressed with the quality of the thoughtfulness and the research that these individuals brought to every meeting. It's interesting, last night someone called me and said, man, that must have been tough. You must be worn out. It was challenging. And I'll never forget, there was a book I read called The Four Agreements. And one of the agreements is don't take things personally. I welcome the conversation because it was candid, it was direct, and it showed that these individuals have a love for this community and they want to see good. So the conversations were open, and it showed the passion that every individual has for this community. So I thank you, Mayor. Thank you for everyone for allowing these conversations to take place. And now I want to turn it over to Mr. J.B. Adams from Adams Learning, who did a lot of the heavy lifting in compiling the information. He'll take us through the recommendation so we can see what the task force will be presenting to you. J.B. Adams.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning to everyone on the Tourist Development Council. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I'd like to start by thanking Mayor Demings and everyone who works in the mayor's office. I want to thank the members of the task force. And I also want to thank our two chairs, Jane Healy and Tony Jenkins, for the opportunity to work with the task force. As Tony said, my name is J.B. Adams. My company is Adams Learning, and I do management consulting. And I was invited to assist with the task force by providing data collection, data interpretation, and facilitation services. So today, I'm just going to walk you through this and tell the story of what the task force did and what they accomplished. I've got an overview of the process, and I'll conclude with the recommendations, and then we'll open it up to questions. So as Mayor Demings just said a moment ago, this task force was impaneled on March 22nd, 2023, to review and provide input to the BCC and the TDC on potential uses for future unencumbered TDT revenues. The task force was comprised of 31 members representing a cross-section of Orange County residents from geographical and socioeconomic groups, including individuals appointed by the commissioners, municipalities within the county, and also representing labor, veterans, and various chambers of commerce and the hospitality industry. Here are the names of the members of those who participated in the task force. And again, you can see there's a very broad and diverse representation from groups throughout all of Orange County. And also a diversity of ideas and passionate interests. I would add that as well. So here's the process that we undertook. The first 2 meetings of the task force took place in March and May. And at these meetings, the task force members received extensive education on the TDT, the Florida statutes and covering TDT uses, the economic impact of previously funded projects, and existing Orange County grant programs. Comptroller Diamond also provided a thorough review of TDT revenues as well as details on the oversight process. Around this same time in the spring, an interest indicator was initiated, and this process was utilized to obtain information on potential community projects seeking TDT funding. There were a total of 55 interest indicators were received, and of those 55, 52 were deemed TDT eligible. The total requested amount from among all of the interest indicators came up to $3.8 billion. And there was a cutoff in the funding requests such that 16 of those made requests in the amount of $20 million or more. Now, whenever an organization makes a request in the amount of greater than $20 million, this exceeds the cap on existing Orange County grant programs, including the Application Review Committee grant, also known as ARC, and the Arts and Cultural Affairs grant. So of these 16, the funding requests ranged from $20 million to $975 million. And of these 16, 14 went ahead to make presentations. So I do want to show you who the 16 were, and you can see also the funding amounts that they requested. And rather than just sort of go through this very quickly, I want to acknowledge that these 16 organizations put a lot of effort into their presentation, so I'm briefly just going to make sure that their names get mentioned. Orlando City Baseball Dreamers, Florida Citrus Sports, Orange County Convention Center, Arts and Cultural Affairs and United Arts, the Amway Center, UCF Sports, the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, Greater Orlando Sports Commission, the Association to Preserve the Eatonville Community, the Application Review Committee, Orange County Regional History Center, Orlando Manello Museum of Art, Lou Gardens, the Holocaust Museum, the Orlando Urban Film Festival, and the Association to Preserve African American Society, History, and Traditions, also known as PAST. So these were the 14 organizations that made the presentations across 3 meetings that took place in May and June. And you may notice that 3 of these organizations are actually granting organizations, and they were treated a little bit differently, and I will come back to that in just a moment. So each one of these organizations gave a presentation that lasted about a half an hour each with open Q&A at the end of each presentation. Task force members were asked to evaluate the applicants using the same criteria that are used by the Application Review Committee. And so the criteria include how well each proposed project contributes to tourism expansion, including attracting tourists, advertising reach, and tourism industry collaboration, how it contributes or has its own project soundness, which includes quality and longevity maintenance, care and stewardship, an effective process and design and planning, operational readiness, as well as financial readiness. And also how it contributes to anticipated return on investment, including the economic benefit to the community, as well as tax revenues. And they rated each one of the applicants was rated on each one of these criteria using a 6-point scale rating from 0 to 5. And that data was collected and analyzed. So we conducted a survey between June 16th and June 20th. We had a participation rate of 30 out of 31 task force members participating. Each task force member had to complete 147 items in the survey. There were 119 quantitative items, and there were 28 open-ended items in which task force members could provide written feedback about each one of the applicants in terms of what they thought were the strengths and their opportunities for improvement. The average amount of time that each task force member spent on the survey was about 60 minutes, and some of them spent more than that, so they took this effort very seriously. And then we came together on June 26, 2023, to review the results of Survey 1 and consider recommendations that we could move along. So I want to focus first on the 3 granting organizations, which include the ARC Committee, Orange County Arts and Cultural Affairs, and Greater Orlando Sports Commission. These 3 were removed from the ranking comparison, and instead the task force members were given specific questions that were customized to the requests of each one of these organizations. And so I'm going to share with you the outcomes in terms of survey support. So for ARC requested that its TDT funding amount increase to $60 million, which is $12 million per year over the course of 5 years, from fiscal 24 to fiscal 28. And from the task force, there was 93% support answering yes to that request. ARC also requested additional funding, such that their funding would go up to $20 million per year over the course of 5 years, for a total of $100 million over that period of time from fiscal 24 to fiscal 28. And 69% of the task force members supported this request as well. ARC requested expanding the maximum amount that they can provide to an individual project, because the range currently falls between $2 million and $10 million. They wanted to increase that range from $2 million to $20 million. There was 60% support for this from the task force. So for the Application Review Committee, solid majority support across all of their requests. For Orange County Arts and Cultural Affairs, the current cap toward individual projects is $500,000. They request that that be increased to $2 million. There was 79% support from the task force for this request. The cultural venue rental subsidy helps groups who need assistance for renting event facilities, and they wanted to increase the cap for that from $500,000 to $1 million. There was 76% support for that request. They currently get 3% of the first 4 cents for their funding. They wanted that to increase to 5% of the first 4 cents. There was 80% support from the task force for that request. And they wanted to increase the fixed amount for their funding from $2 million to $5 million. And there was 77% support from the task force for that request. And the third granting organization is Greater Orlando Sports Commission. The current operational funding per year for Go Sports is $300,000. They wanted that increased to $740,660.50 per year, and there was 80% support for that request from the task force. And they also wanted to increase the amount of sports incentive committee funding from $4 million per year to $10 million per year for the next 11 years. There was 67, or two-thirds of the task force supported that request. And so all of that leads to the task force first recommendation, which is supporting advancing the 3 granting organizations' request as presented to the Board of County Commissioners, including the survey results for the board to make the final level of funding decision. So there was support from the task force for all 3 of these organizations to have their funding requests addressed. Now we move on to the remaining 11 organizations that participated in a rating and ranking process. So I know there's a lot going on in this slide, but I'm going to try and break it down for you. You actually see 2 lists. There's 11 on the left, and there's also 11 on the right. That's the same list twice, but there were 2 key measurements that were conducted in the survey. And so one of the measurements was using the Application Review Committee's criteria, which I mentioned previously, and what you see on the left are the weighted scores of those 11 applicants. We broke them into 3 clusters because they sort of had natural breaks in between them. So the orange zone shows those that had a weighted score of greater than 80. The yellow zone has a weighted score between 80 and 60, and the pink zone shows scores that were weighted below 60. On the right-hand side, you see what the task force said with regard to perceptions of readiness in terms of, again, is this project ready to go and to be considered for funding? The orange zone shows those organizations that had readiness rated at over 90%. The yellow zone is between 90 and 50%, and the pink zone was below 50% perceived readiness by the task force. So we wanted to put them in those clusters to just sort of help with the decision making. And you will notice that there was one applicant that sort of is in both lists, in that the Manello Museum of Art was in the pink zone with regard to its weighted score, but it was in the yellow zone with regard to its perceived readiness. And if you have any more questions about these, I can follow up on that as well. We had a lot of discussion about these 11 applicants and the way that the numbers turned out, but it all led to this recommendation from the task force. Recommendation 2 is that the task force supports advancing groups with a weighted score of 60 or higher for consideration by the BCC in this order and rank: Orange County Convention Center, Florida Citrus Sports, Amway Center, Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, and UCF Sports. And those are the organizations that were in the orange and yellow zones for weighted scores in the previous slide. After that session, we had one more survey. So between June 28th and July 3rd, we surveyed the task force members again to just ask what additional ideas and topics do you want to discuss at our next meeting? What more work can the task force do? For the meeting that was scheduled for yesterday, we had 17 task force members provide a total of 33 comments. Those comments were read and quantified and presented at yesterday's meeting on July 17th. Task force members, in this case, their responses were not anonymous, and their comments were labeled, and as I said, they were put together using something thematic analysis. So in general, what you see on this summary slide is that 9 members of the task force in general mentioned something about alternative uses for TDD funding. 3 of the members just had general calls for let's explore some alternative uses for TDT funding. 6 of the members had specific calls for things they wanted to be considered for TDT funding, including mass transit infrastructure in the county, funding for specific communities, other infrastructure projects, and other projects in general. And then below that, you see some of the other topics that were proposed. 4 members from the task force said our work is complete, and they did not want to entertain other alternatives. 3 task force members wanted to talk about affordable housing for workers and its association with the tourist impact tax. 3 task force members wanted to make recommended changes to policy or oversight. 2 task force members had procedural concerns or questions, and 3 task force members had one-off comments that didn't connect to anything else. All of these comments are provided in the report from Survey 2 if you want to look that up, and these were all discussed very thoroughly yesterday, and that leads to our remaining recommendations. So recommendation 3 from the task force is that the task force recommends that Mayor Demings and the Board of County Commissioners strongly push the legislature to change the tourist impact tax so it applies to all counties in Florida. And again, this recommendation is addressing the discussion we had about affordable housing for hospitality industry workers. And our 4th recommendation from yesterday's session is that the task force recommends that the county update its criteria for assessing TDT project funding to better evaluate the project's contribution to community and workforce jobs and needs. And so again, this goes back to the criteria that I mentioned to you before, using the ARC criteria that looked at tourism expansion, project soundness, and anticipated return on investment. And there was a lot of dialogue about what can we include in this criteria to make sure that it also addresses the needs of our community, including workers' wages, benefits, and health care as examples. And with that, I'm putting all 4 of the recommendations on a single slide to summarize. and I will invite our co-chairs to get involved and see if there's any additional questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay. With that, at this time, you've had a broad overview of a fairly complex process that got us to this relative point. And so I open up for members of the council to ask any questions of anyone that has presented at this time. Any questions? Okay. Mayor Gardner?
Sorry, I don't know which button. Do you have any idea what happened to those that, and this is first a general question, then I have more. What happened to those organizations that did not present? If you make it to the top 16, but only 14 presented, what happened to the other two?
Most of them were included in the ARC. They were,
Okay.
so they were,
Got it.
that's why we separated them off into a different yes or no, because, you know, to judge 30 organizations against the convention center, we didn't have presentations on all of them. So that will be dealt
Okay.
with in the individual meetings of, yeah, and so there's another organization will deal with that. So what we wanted to deal with was just increasing the money. So
Okay.
we're saying yes or no on the money. They're going to get more money, and let the other county
Okay.
granting organizations deal with how they will rank on that. So
Okay.
I think there were a couple that pulled out. I think Lou Gardens ended up pulling out, and the Holocaust, I believe. So there were a few of them after they saw, I think, the level of detail that was needed in these presentations that they pulled back.
Okay, and that led to my other question. For when you look at this, some of this is like Muhammad Ali fighting Sugar Ray Leonard, two different categories. What leverage or what assistance was given to those that felt that this task was daunting, although they probably had a product that would that needed the funding to generate the visitation? What help did they have?
You're talking about the ones that we didn't recommend that were at the end said weren't ready, or?
Well, if you look at the
The
list,
smaller organizations.
Yes, the smaller
That's what
organizations.
she's asking.
because if I had a smaller organization compared to it, and this isn't a general statement. If I have a smaller organization and you're asking me to present on a higher level platform, I either have to have the resources to get the team together to do that, or my presentation is not going to compare.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
how did
Well,
you
first of all,
balance that?
I think that some help's going to be offered to them, isn't it, for getting their presentation? Because just let me say one thing: it's not that people disagreed with what they were trying to do in the wells built and stuff. It's that in the presentations there were too many things left out for us to be able to really. They really were not ready for to go ahead, and the big five were, but. The county, I think, wants to give them help in getting how do you get a presentation together? How do you make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you're doing it? Because the things that a couple of these proposals didn't even have the land. If you have
Right.
things you don't even own the land, there were two in particular like that: the baseball stadium and the Zora Festival. There's still a big fight over land there, so we couldn't. I think the task force members seem to agree they couldn't go forward and with some of these projects that are not ready to be done.
Mayor Gardner, you brought up a really good point, and actually there is no formal grant program for projects outside of the ARC limits, which right now is about $10 million. So there's a very rigorous process for arts and cultural affairs that gets you up to $500,000, and ARC goes from $2 million to $10 million. So this was the first time we ever sent groups who were asking for money through a process, and we learned a lot. And one of the things that we learned is that we do need to have some kind of grant preparation program, and that's one of the takeaways from this is how can we work with some of these smaller or even the larger ones needed a little bit more help putting together their plan, and that's a takeaway from this. And in fact, some of the groups we have encouraged to go through the arts and cultural pairs or ARC process to then get money for a feasibility study or something smaller so they can walk before they run.
Okay, and one more question. These numbers are not set in stone, correct? So for the larger projects, if once the projects are complete, and if there's funding left, I assume that stays in the pot, correct?
And that's something that county,
Oh,
we did not deal.
That's yours.
We did not get
Okay, never
into-
mind.
The short answer
We didn't get
is-
into how much money everybody gets. We
Yes.
were looking as a project, and
Right.
should this project be ranked? That's up to Mayor Demings and the commission to dole
Sorry.
out the money,
Okay.
so they can do
You're right.
whatever they want. We did not do that. The only
Okay.
thing we got into the money was a yes or no for the Arts and the
Okay.
Sports Commission.
All
about.
right, then
Okay.
I can hold that question. This is not appropriate.
Okay.
Okay. And final, I just want to say thank you, Mayor Demings. I love the process. I love the extra voices in it, the diversification. And I want to also thank the Tourist Advisory Board members. It was a wonderful idea.
Mayor Gardner, that was an excellent, those were excellent questions that you asked. One of the things that through this process, what this is saying is that this volunteer group of citizens affirm the structure that has been in place historically for decades about how we receive applications and how the decision-making process is. But within the structure, they have made these recommendations about how we can expand within the broader structure of the process of making allocations from the tourist development tax receipts. And this is consistent. Our controller is here, Phil Diamond. At the end of the day, the controller, we're the only county in Florida that still has an independently elected auditor. Phil Diamond and his team, they cut all the checks. So they have to make certain that before they cut the checks, the agreements, every one of the organizations that receive dollars from our tourist development taxes, there's a contractual agreement that we have. And so he looks to make certain that all provisions of that contractual agreement have been met. You know, his signature is on the check and my signature is on the check, but they're the ones that handle that process. So they preserve the overall process. Now the Board of County Commissioners will get to either accept the recommendations or modify them as we go forward to make any decisions. Okay. All right. Mr. McGavin.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
If there are any others, by the way, that want to speak, just remember, just hit that little, where it says Q there, just hit that button if you wish to speak, and I'll try my best to acknowledge you. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Just a quick question on the three granting organizations. The recommendation that you're putting forth, which is number one here on the recommendation, is it some version of the increase in funding, or could you clarify what specific the recommendation is? Or is it just some version of increasing?
We want to increase the funding. I think the requests were, it was all different, you know, $4 million to $10 million for the Sports Commission, and there was strong support for actually those numbers. And that's what the county commission will get, that we think as a group they ought to have more money than they can deal with for the arts and theater. I think there's a feeling that these groups generally are struggling. They don't have enough money. This is generally, a lot of it is year-to-year allocation. And the task force had stronger recommendations on that than anything we had, that they thought that the arts and theaters and the Sports Commission marketing basically need more money out of the tax.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So it was between the current funding and the highest level of funding that's on the grid that you shared with us?
Yeah.
Some version there.
We supported what they asked for, basically.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Member McGavin, I would like to point out that for ARC, they do not get funding automatically. Arts and Cultural Affairs gets 3% of the first 4 pennies. ARC only gets their funding from excess revenues, and it has to be designated by the board. So the last time they received funding was 2018, and that was for $40 million, and that money has been committed. As you can see, we have about 33 groups that are interested in more ARC funding. So what the task force recommended is that the BCC put money into ARC, and I think 93% said 60 million over the next 5 years, and then I forgot the other amount, a lesser amount said 100 million over the next 5 years.
Okay. All right, Mr. Stein.
Great job, you guys, on your process and your recommendations. I agree with a lot of what you're proposing in principle. The dollar amounts obviously need to be addressed. The one thing I want to go on record as saying is we are talking dollar amounts, is that the Convention Center project, which is at the top of the list, that number that I looked at was 2019, and obviously that number needs to be recalibrated to reflect 2023 numbers. So just want to go on record saying that.
Okay, I think the other part of the narrative that came up was a concern by multiple members of the task force that there needed to be expanded uses that would support the workers within the community, that would preserve jobs, that would address even affordable housing challenges that we have as a community, and looking to legislatively lobby Tallahassee to change or expand or modify existing laws that will allow additional new streams of money that will come in to allow us as a county to address some of those social issues. What I said yesterday to everyone that was present, I see Commissioner Wilson join us here from the Board of County Commission. I don't see any of my other colleagues here. But one thing that I know is that our commission is absolutely committed to addressing the social challenges that we have as a community. And we look at the breadth of all of the funding buckets that we have as a county to address those needs. Primarily, we address the social challenges through our general fund. The general ad valorem taxes are collected that supports that. And it is my advocacy that because we do have the blessing of this tourist development tax, it has historically relieved pressure on some of the other revenue streams that we have to be able to address the social challenges, the homelessness, the crime-related issues, issues related to treatment, providing treatment for the mentally ill, to addressing the housing crisis that we have. We have been able to, over time, do some creative things, one of which is going back to 2019 to address the housing affordability challenges that we have. We were able to use our general fund revenues to create Orange County's first housing trust fund, where the commitment by our board is that over a 10-year period of time, we will put $160 million into that fund, that we would change our regulatory authorities to help incentivize the creation and the building of workforce housing within our community, that we would leverage that against private sector investment, and we would work with the community. And we have two major partners that are doing, actually we have several major partners, but We have Disney and Universal Resorts Orlando that have committed to doing some workforce housing in the job centers. In addition, we are partnering with Habitat for Orange and Osceola County, where we are using a patchwork of our surplus lands in Orange County to put in play to build workforce affordable housing for families. And so we have been moving the needle. That Housing Trust Fund, the goal is to, over a 10-year period of time, stimulate 30,000 additional affordable and attainable housing units within Orange County. Of course, the pandemic came and it created a little bit of a setback for many reasons, supply chain issues, people couldn't gather, they couldn't execute the plans, a number of things. So that slowed the process down a little bit, but we are quickly picking up steam. But what I'm saying to you in managing the county's entire budget, what myself, the board, and county administration has to do is look across the spectrum of all of our available revenue and make decisions. Because we have the TDT, it allowed us to do what we're doing with the general fund with housing. It has allowed us to address transportation. We have a $100 million plan to kind of take some baby steps and moving the needle a bit to address transportation. We have another $100 million plan to increase preservation lands, where we want to double the current green space that we have by another 23,000 acres over a 10-year period of time. We couldn't do any of those things that are important to our community if we had to, the things that the TDT does today, if we had to take money from those other buckets to address these issues to try to protect the $75 billion industry that we have, you can see their competing interests. And so what I was simply saying yesterday was that I did not want that our community to feel that there were winners or losers here, that if we, the Board of County Commission, look at accepting the recommendations as they are presented, that somehow we would not also be simultaneously addressing those other issues. Because we have been addressing those issues, we are addressing those issues, and we will continue to address those issues to the extent that we have dollars available. As a local government, we cannot run a deficit. So last week we had our budget work sessions here in Orange County. The proposed budget for the next fiscal year that will begin October 1, we still have to get through our public hearings and all of that, is a $6.8 billion budget. I said yesterday, even with $6.8 billion, it is not enough to do everything that the people expect us to be doing, because we cannot run a deficit. It has to balance. That's not the same rules of engagement for the federal government. They run deficits, to meet the needs of the people. The state has to balance its budget. We have to balance our budget. The mayors of our municipalities, they cannot run a deficit. They must balance their budgets. It's unlawful to run deficits. So I say that to this audience as well, because I kind of want people to understand that we're going to move the needle in every one of those areas, okay, if that makes sense to you. Okay. All right. Any other questions by members of the board? Okay. Well, to our co-chairs, thank you very much for the presentations. You did a great job. that was the business that we needed to take care of today. And while there's not a specific action item that we have, but what I would like to do is, by this body, the Tourist Development Council, I would like by affirmation for this body to affirm that you support the forwarding of these recommendations on to the Board of County Commission for their final consideration and decision-making.
I move that we support the recommendations of the TDT Citizens Advisory Task Force and recommend that they be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by, I believe that was Mr. Hawkins. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right. The motion passes, and it is unanimous. If there's no other business before us today, the next meeting of the Tourist Development Council will be Friday, September 29th, 2023, at 9 a.m. here in the chambers. And with that,
Mayor
we'll
Devins,
stand
before
adjourned.
you adjourn, I do have just one question on process. So we have recommendations that don't put dollar amounts or necessarily say to fund all 5 of the applicants, and then we have some additional recommendations increasing various funds to the granting organizations. So this set of recommendations comes to the Board of County Commissioners, but it seems like there's some very difficult details that need to be worked out in terms of whether you guys are going to issue debt service, how much money do you think is actually available to be used for any or all of these projects. So I was just wondering if you could give us a little insight into some of those issues.
So I'll back up. Thank you, Mayor Dyer. At the board meeting scheduled for July the 25th, there will be a presentation by the co-chairs to the Board of County Commission. At that time, the Board of County Commission will accept or reject the recommendations, but the goal is that after acceptance of the recommendations, that it is my desire to then schedule a work session with the Board of County Commission, because we can't put the cart before the horse. The board has to first accept the recommendations. And once that happens, our staff will have to work in terms of defining what it means to move forward with bonding, all of the other complex issues with the expenditure plan. Well, we will come back and do a work session with the board. We'll get their input. We'll develop the actual spending plan at that time and all of the details that's associated with that to make certain that the expenditures are within our ability to pull off the projects, the various projects. And so that will happen. My desire is to have that happen before because there may be some budget implications before we get to public hearings for our FY 23-24 budget. And so consequently, we'll need to have all of those details in order to, if we're going to make any modifications within the budget line items. Okay, if that makes sense to you. Okay, all right. No further questions. All right. Then now we stand adjourned. All right. Thank you all for your presence.